Today's episode is titled, I don't know if you saw this, Bennett, The
I did.
Portal Giveth and the Portal Taketh. We're going to start on the Portal Taketh. Excuse me. That was supposed to be a really good intro. The Portal Giveth is how we're starting. I messed that up. Damn it. So rewind. So Bennett, today's title is The Portal Giveth and the Portal Taketh. We're going to start today's podcast on the Portal Giveth.
Oh,
because Preston, thank you for acting like that was the first time you heard it. Preston Spradlin's having himself a masterclass in the portal.
Portal Hall.
Portal Hall. Can I just go over it with you?
Yeah, it's a lot of guys.
So far, Xavier Brown, he's coming back.
Pizza's
what are you
ready.
laughing about? Pizza's ready. I'm going to hit you this, and then we're going to go solo cam on you as I get this pizza out of the oven. Ricks comes from Morehead State. Eddie Ricks, 6'7".
Right.
Justin Taylor comes from Syracuse, 6'6". AJ Smith, 6'6". Ebenezer Dewana, 6'11". Elijah Hutchins Everett, 6'11". Both of those guys, P5 transfers. Mm-hmm. Luke Anderson, a D2 transfer who's over a 40% shooter. Luke Anderson, 6'7". He comes in. The portal has giveth, man, for Preston Spradlin and the Dukes.
I got to reach back out to these guys who I was trying to connect with and initially talked to a couple of them and didn't end up getting them. So hopefully we'll get some interviews here for the podcast. But Luke Anderson, you mentioned him, played at Iowa State, South Florida, then went to the D2 ranks and averaged like 20 a game on 40% shooting from three. 6'7", 225. He's a big dude. I think that's kind of what stands out for everybody of the six players. Of the guys they've added, they're all at least 6'6". I believe they're all over 200 pounds, or I think Ricks is close to it maybe, but I think he's over. So they're bigger than they've been. Byington had some kind of slender guys. Terrence Edwards kind of included. But these guys are big. Like, there are a lot of 6'6", 6'7", 220. And then you had 2 7-footers who can play.
No, 6'11".
I'm rounding up. 2 7-footers who can play. JMU's had 7-footers in the past, but they're usually like walk-ons or our guy Joel Mensah. These guys have played like legit minutes for quality teams.
It's insane. The size, you mentioned it. I didn't hear your whole thing, but the size is just insane. We got so accustomed. We have a group chat with our friend Brian, and it's been labeled every offseason, Dukes need a big. And let me see what the group chat's labeled now, because after everything Preston Spradlin did, I think you changed it. Dukes are big.
Yeah.
It's confirmed. The Dukes are big. Everyone they've brought in would have been one of the tallest players on any team under Mark Byington. Like, that's insane to me. The shortest guy they brought in was 6'6". When Mark Byington brought in a 6'6" guy, you're like, that's the 4. They bring in a 6'6" guy now, you're like, that might be the 2.
Yeah. There's also a lot of proven guys. So they had AJ Smith on the wing, who was averaging almost 14 points a game last year, almost 9 rebounds a game.
From where did he come from? Southern Indiana?
Southern Indiana. So lower, I think it's OVC. So he still played against Spradlin, so they know his game. That's relatively low competition, but like Justin Taylor was starting at Syracuse. Pretty cool. Eddie Ricks was a pretty important player, led Morehead State in blocks. He's played a lot. Then you have like the rotational bigs, but Hutchins Everett started and was a key contributor for Austin Peay before going to Seton Hall and can actually kind of shoot the 3 as well. And then Luke Anderson.
I think he's my favorite. He's my favorite pickup.
He might be the best. He also had a video on his Instagram that was like a minute long, kind of talking about his basketball story. And maybe it's like 90 seconds. But he was talking about how he kind of like fell out of love with the game when he was at his 2.
Iowa State and UCF, right?
USF, yeah.
USF.
So he was at those 2. He was highly recruited. His offers out of high school were nuts. I mean, he was like Florida State. Like a bunch of Power 5s were looking at him. So he kind of fell out of love. He said he wasn't working hard enough. Started working a lot harder, changed his game. He has an array of moves. He can shoot and he's large. Like he loves basketball.
He's a 6'7" shooter. He shot 40% from 3.
It's just a crazy ad. I mean, they pretty much added a group that like those 6, and then you add a point guard, and that's like that's a good 7.
So they still have 5 scholarships left. And I just got to say, Mark Freeman, he's still out there.
Decision soon, he said on social media on the 27th of April. So it's been a few days. I thought he would have announced by now.
I thought he meant like tomorrow. When
so did I.
So we'll see. JMU's been in contact with him. It seems that Mark Freeman, I mean, the transfer portal is now closed, so no one can enter. So Mark Freeman may have been just waiting out, see what bags he may have gotten, because he's been in contacts with some P5, some American Athletic Conference, namely Memphis has been linked to him heavily, but there's potential that he may go big. But I mean, there's still a gaping point guard size hole for this team. Xavier Brown's going to fill it, but you need two of them. You can't just rely on one guy in Xavier Brown. You need two of them. And depending on how this all shakes out, Xavier Brown might play some of the two. Who knows? All I know is there's still a spot left for a contributing scoring point guard. And it is a little head scratching to me that Mark Freeman, who's still out there, hasn't announced anything, and Preston Spradlin hasn't gotten a point guard in there, because it's clearly he undersold and over-delivered. His recruiting ability in the transfer portal is absolutely amazing. And so I think maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe this is too much galaxy brain, but it's insane to me that they haven't gotten a point guard to go alongside Xavier Brown, and Mark Freeman is still out there.
I think he's definitely waiting on that one. I know he visited Wisconsin, but I think Wisconsin they've added a few guys this week, and we're looking at some guards. I think the same thing was true of Memphis. I was talking to Daniel Merriman last week off the podcast, and he had mentioned, I think, to us that Memphis added some like point guard, and I don't know that he would necessarily fit anymore. And he's from Memphis, I believe. So that was sort of one that was worrisome. He knows Spradlin. It's also cool because you read some articles about him. It's like, yeah, he's looking at Auburn, Memphis, Wisconsin, James Madison. It's like, that's cool. To be in that list is really fun.
And I think the whole reason they're still on that list is Preston Spradlin is a recruiting madman. Because
he's killing it.
We'll talk about it later. The NIL isn't for bringing kids in. And those other schools he's going up against are giving him a bag if he decides to go there. And JMU's not.
No, and they don't have much, like, if they wanted to, they don't really have bags. Like, it would just be like little pouches maybe, but they don't have much. An NIL pouch. That's what JMU needs to start doing. They need to start getting people to donate $5,000 and be like, you just gave us an NIL pouch. Thank you.
That's actually not a bad idea. You know how cool it would be for the NIL? You get a pouch and you can say, my pouch brought in Mark Freeman.
That would be sick.
Like you could see exactly which player you brought in.
Yeah, I want some more of that. But if they get Freeman, it would be obviously massive, right? Because you're looking at teams like Wisconsin and Memphis and Auburn who want him.
Well, it's also insane to me that even if they don't add Mark Freeman, even if they don't add like a high-end point guard,
yeah,
I assume they're going to run something out that looks like Xavier Brown with Taylor, maybe Eddie Ricks, Luke Anderson, probably Luke Anderson over Ricks at the 3 maybe. And then you got Ebenezer, Dewana, Elijah Hutchins, Everett, and you got Jarrell Roberson on the bench there too. Roberson probably be a really good depth piece if he can continue his growth. But you're looking at a lineup that boasts Xavier Brown, Justin Taylor, Luke Anderson, AJ Smith, and let's say Elijah Hutchins Everett as your starting 5. Shortest guy there is Xavier Brown, your point guard. You got Luke Anderson, a 40% shooter from 3, who's a 6'7" skillful scorer. You have AJ Smith, a 6'6" guy that in the OVC a year ago, a similar league to the Sun Belt, is dropping 14 a game. That's a Sun Belt Conference championship winning 5. And then on the bench, oh, by the way, you have Eddie Ricks, Jarrell Roberson, Ebenezer, Dewana.
It's a nice group with a lot of scholarships to work with.
So, and you got 5 Scallies left.
It's very exciting what Spradlin has done with this group. They look like they're absolutely loaded. And then also, I don't think Horton and Amadi have announced yet. I wouldn't necessarily expect them to come back, but you gotta think it's like, hey, you would probably be in the rotation.
Do you think Amadi would be?
I think Amadi could be at the 4.
Yeah, he's springy and he's a very athletic 4 that could give some belt defenses some issues. Yeah,
because he can defend. They both can defend. I think that's what's interesting is like Spradlin's got the pitch. It's like, you can defend. That's what we're trying to do. So if you want to come, like we're stacked, you can see the portal hall. Like we're going to be good. You wouldn't have to change anything. We're right? Living in the same town, playing at the same arena. So it'd be interesting if they keep one or both of those guys. But even if they don't really add more, like you were saying, should still kind of be competing for the Sun Belt title, which is sweet.
I mean, if you don't add anything more, you're sitting there with what? 7, 8 guys in a rotation, and that's about what you're playing for the most of the season.
Right. And then you would fill out the scholarship. So then you're adding either freshmen or transfers, and there's freshmen coming in that like, oh, maybe they're good enough to contribute. We don't know.
Can I tell you a crazy thing about this transfer portal class? And you can't get too attached to these kids because they have one good year, they'll bounce.
Yeah.
Who knows? But thinking, in maybe last year brain or 2 years ago brain, Eddie Rick still has 3 years of eligibility. Justin Taylor has 2 years of eligibility. AJ Smith has 2 years of eligibility. A lot of times with the Mark Byington era, he'd be bringing in one and dones, which worked out for him. Clearly, he won the Sun Belt Championship, won against Wisconsin. But this is a team that has the potential to really build some connectivity, some cohesiveness, some synergy. If they're able to keep them, maybe the collective, maybe there's a vast change on the horizon with the NCAA. Who knows what's happening? But that's crazy to me that 3 of the 6 have multiple years of eligibility.
They've got a chance to be really good. I'm excited about what they're building. I think the other thing is they've got a chance to be so balanced. I think what's kind of interesting is Amadi was obviously injured, but Horton was really good. But because JMU was so deep in balance this year, I feel like he's probably not getting the looks that he could. Yeah, because a lot of what he did was really good defense and wasn't a focal point in the offense or anything like that. Where you're going to have guys on this roster that play very, very well. And because there's so many good players on the roster, they might end up staying just because they're going to have to split points in defense and minutes. So if they can find a way to gel and play unselfishly, which I think the team this past year was really good at, that's a nice group.
All right, Bennett. So you know how the title of today's podcast is The Portal Giveth and the Portal Taketh? We're keeping on The Portal Giveth. Because women's basketball head coach Sean O'Regan, he's bolstering the roster. They lost Chloe Sterling and Steph Odekirk to transfers. They lost Heaven Bristow and Carol Miller to graduation. They keep a huge core of that roster, which is massive. But they also lost coaches Neil Harrow and Lexi Barrier. However, what would you say was the number one issue for JMU women's basketball this past year, Bennett?
Probably turnovers, the backcourt, ball handling.
Wow, we didn't even talk about this pre-pod. You know who they added in the transfer portal? A guard, and a guard.
Hey, 3 guards. We absolutely love to see that.
Rose Scott, a guard from Marshall. She led the Thundering Herd in scoring in 2022, 2023. Didn't really play a lot this last year, but should be a good piece. Zakiah Stevenson, a Ole Miss transfer. Bree Robinson, a Michigan State transfer. 2 P5 bench players, but I mean, Coach O, you saw the impact that Caroline Germain's absence put on this team. I think Coach O saw that. He addressed it in the portal, and he's getting some guards. Hopefully one of them can step up and play that role that Germain played.
Yeah, you've got 2 really young Power 5 transfers with a ton of ability, and then sort of the more proven scorer in Rose Scott from Marshall. Super nice group, right? And then you return a lot, right? Hazel, McDaniel, Kozlova. There are a lot of really important pieces coming back. And the one thing, I mean, they played Marshall in overtime in the Sun Belt Championship and turned the ball over 40 times. I think it was 39, but turned the ball over 40 times.
I thought it was 50.
And they almost beat them with a just disgusting amount of turnovers. If you can limit those, Kim Caldwell went to Tennessee because she's a beast.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. God, that was brutal. There's not going to be a team, I don't think, that's dominant next year, unless it's JMU. It feels like for both teams, the men and the women, again, going into next year, they both have a very legitimate chance to make the NCAA tournament. But yeah, they got to figure out the turnover thing. I think 2 uber talented Power 5 transfers at guard, and then a really good scorer from a mid-major is a good way to start.
I agree wholeheartedly.